10 years. A decade is long enough for a child to be born and learn to call out dad. For me, 10 years was the time I lived with an invisible label stuck to my back, the live-in son-in-law. It sounds like just a title, but for a man, it feels like a scar carved into his pride. No one ever said to my face that I was inferior, but their eyes said everything. The looks when I walked into family gatherings, the looks when someone introduced me. This is Min, Lin's husband. He lives with her family. Just those last few words were enough. I never thought I would end up like Thoughty was born in a small town. My parents weren't wealthy, but we had enough. I grew up with a simple belief. A man must have a house, a career, a position in society. I studied hard, graduated with decent grades. I believed that if I worked hard enough, I would soon buy a small apartment in Hanoi. Then I met Lin. She wasn't loud or flashy. She was gentle, with clear eyes but a strong will. With her, I no longer felt like a provincial guy trying too hard to survive in the city. I loved Lin, and I thought love was big enough to overcome any distance. I was wrong. The opposition's day I officially came to meet her parents. The atmosphere felt wrong from the start. Their old townhouse in Hanoi was spacious but solemn. The walls were filled with certificates, awards, and formal event photos. Her parents were retired civil servants. Everything in the house was orderly. I sat there feeling like I was at a job interview. Her father was quiet. He asked about my job, my income, my future plans. Every question was polite, but sharp as a scalpel. Her mother was different. She didn't go in circles. Do you own a house in Hanoi yet? No, not yet. Then where will you live after marriage? I hesitated. She said it directly. My daughter will not marry a man who doesn't even have a place to live in the city. That sentence felt like a slap. That night, back in my rented room, my hands were still trembling. I thought about walking away, but Lin held my hand. Her eyes did not waver. If you love me, you'll get through this. I'll convince my parents. I believed her. The condition to months later, her parents agreed to the wedding. I thought I had won, but then they set a condition. For now, you can live here. When things are stable, we'll discuss later. For now. 2 words light as the wind. I didn't know that for now would last 10 years. The day I moved in, it was drizzling in Hanoi. I carried 2 boxes of clothes and an old suitcase. That was everything I owned. Our wedding room was right next to her parents' bedroom, just a few steps between the doors. That first night, lying on the new bed, I heard footsteps in the hallway, a light cough, the TV murmuring softly. I felt like I didn't belong. The next morning, I woke early to make coffee. I placed my cup slightly out of line with the others. My father-in-law glanced over. He didn't say anything, just tapped his finger lightly on the table. A small sound, but enough. The unspoken less. No one ever yelled at me, but everything had standards. My salary had to be given to my wife to manage. No unnecessary spending. Report where I was going. Explain if I came home late. My mother-in-law often reminded me, a man must know how to take care of his family. It was true. But every time she said it, I felt like a child being taught how to be an adult. Once, I bought a shirt more expensive than usual. She looked at the receipt and said, "Your salary isn't that high. Don't be extravagant." I smiled awkwardly, but something inside me collapsed. Pressure from outside. The hardest part wasn't inside the house. It was outside. Relatives, neighbors, old friends. Living with your wife's family? That's comfortable, isn't it? If you don't have a house, you have to accept it. Some said it jokingly, some meant it. At weddings, when men gathered to talk about buying houses, investments, building careers, I felt smaller. I worked harder, trying to prove my worth. But every night, stepping back through that door, I felt like all my efforts weren't enough to erase those 3 words, live-in son-in-law. Sleepless nights. There were nights I lay beside Lin, staring into the dark ceiling. I asked myself, am I sacrificing too much? Or am I just avoiding the truth that I'm not good enough yet to give my wife a home of our own? Lin always said she didn't care where we lived. But deep down, I knew a man wants to build his own home. I lived in a defensive state, careful, alert, afraid of making mistakes. I wasn't the confident man I used to be. I became quieter, and I thought, maybe this would be my life forever. But I had no idea the real turning point was still waiting. One morning, one phone call, one moment that turned everything upside down. And from that moment on, the label live-in son-in-law began to change its meaning. The stroke happened on a morning while I was in a meeting. My phone kept vibrating. 3 missed calls from Lynn. She had never called me that many times in a row before. I stepped out into the hallway and answered. Her voice was shaking. Come home now. Dad collapsed. He can't speak. I don't remember how I got a taxi. I don't remember how long the road felt that day. I only remember my heart pounding so hard it hurt. When I arrived home, the ambulance had already left. The house, so orderly and neat for 10 years, was in chaos. Chairs out of place. A cup of water spilled. My mother-in-law was sitting on the floor, hair disheveled, eyes red. Had never seen her like that. At the hospital, the doctor said to short words, stroke, mild or severe. What are the chances of recovery? Will there be lasting damage? The answer hovered in the air. We need to monitor him. The fall of a once strong manly father-in-law used to walk fast. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his words were firm. Now he lay there, the right side of his body motionless, his mouth twisted, his eyes confused like a frightened child. He looked at me. For the first time, I saw no scrutiny in his eyes, only fear. I stood still. The man who once made me tense just because I placed a cup slightly out of line, now couldn't even hold one. Life can be brutally direct. The first cracks, the hospital was crowded. The smell of disinfectant was suffocating. My mother-in-law was nearly broken. Lynn cried while handling paperwork. I was the one who signed the treatment consent form. In that moment, I understood, if I didn't step forward, no one else was calm enough to do it. But another voice echoed in my head. Is this really my responsibility? He's never truly acknowledged me in 10 years. Should I sacrifice my career for this? I hated myself for those thoughts, but they were there, and they hurt. The decision after a week of emergency treatment, the doctor said he was out of critical danger, but recovery would take a long time. Who would take care of him? Hire a nurse? The cost was high, and my mother-in-law didn't trust strangers. Lynn looked at me. She didn't say anything, but I understood. That night, I sat alone in the room. I remembered every scrutinizing look over the past 10 years, every careless remark that wounded my pride. Then I remembered the fear in his eyes in the hospital bed. When people are strong, they sometimes hurt others, but when they fall, they are just human. The next morning, I requested long-term leave from work. My boss was surprised. Are you sure? Your career is taking off. I wasn't sure, but I knew that if I turned my back now, I would never be able to look at myself in the mirror again. Endless day scurrying for a stroke patient isn't like the emotional scenes in movies. It's the smell of medicine, sweat, changing diapers, sudden muscle spasms, sleepless nights. The first time I fed him porridge, his hand trembled violently. The porridge spilled onto his shirt. He cried, not loudly, just silent tears rolling down. I don't know if he cried from pain, helplessness, or shame that the man he once judged was now feeding him spoon by spoon. I only said, Dad, one more spoonful. I don't know when I started calling him Dad so naturally. The darkest nights, he was in so much pain. The whole house stayed awake. My mother-in-law was so exhausted she fell asleep sitting up. Lynn wiped her tears while changing his bandages. I massaged his limbs, afraid they would stiffen. There were times I was drained, times I snapped for no reason, times I stood on the balcony, looking down at the street, wondering, if I weren't living with my wife's family, would I have to carry this burden? The thought alone made me ashamed. If I weren't here, maybe I wouldn't witness these moments either. We often think we are being constrained, but sometimes those very constraints give us the chance to prove who we are. Small changes. 3 months passed. 6 months. His fingers began to twitch slightly. His mouth formed a few broken sounds. I did physical therapy with him every day, counting each step. 1, 2, 3. Some days he got angry and pushed my hand away. Some days he stayed silent and refused to cooperate. But I didn't give up, because I understood. He was fighting his own helplessness, and I was fighting my own ego. Nearly a year sounds short, but living through each of those days taught me what patience truly means. My career nearly stalled. Our savings thinned. Some people said I was foolish, living with your in-laws and still sacrificing that much. I didn't argue. For the first time in 10 years, I no longer cared what people called me. I only knew I was doing what felt right. The fateful afternoon, the sun was gentle. I helped him out into the yard to practice walking. each step slow, feet dragging, sweat on his forehead. I joked, "If you walk any faster, Dad, I won't be able to keep up." He stopped. He looked at me for a long time. Then his trembling hand held mine, not for balance, but to keep me there. His eyes were no longer clouded like before. He struggled to pronounce each word, each syllable broken, distorted, yet clear, and that sentence made me stand there in shock. "The, NK, you, son." Each word came out with difficulty. I thought I had misheard. His hand was still holding mine, not the grip of someone trying to steady himself anymore, but a deliberate grip. He took a deep breath, his voice broken. "You are my son." I stood frozen. 10 years living in this house, and I had never heard him call me that. Not Min, not young man, not that silent, scrutinizing look, but son. I felt something inside my chest crack open. He continued slowly but clearly, "I'm sorry." Those two words broke me. I turned my face away. I didn't want him to see my eyes turning red. For 10 years, I thought I had to prove my worth, had to try twice as hard, had to hold myself strong. But in that moment, I understood. What I had truly been waiting for was not money, not status, not praise. It was recognition. The first embrace, he couldn't hug me. Half of his body was still weak, but his trembling hand tightened around mine a little more. I bent down and whispered, "Dad, please don't say that. I only did what I should." He shook his head gently. The look in his eyes was no longer the look of a man who once judged me. It was the look of a man who realized he was wrong, and brave enough to admit it. Suddenly, I felt more compassion for him than all the hurt pride I had carried for years. Change began with the smallest things from that day on. The atmosphere in the house changed, not in a loud, dramatic way. There were no grand declarations, but everything softened. My mother-in-law started asking, "Are you tired today?" Just one sentence, but she had never asked that before. Meals were no longer filled with heavy silence. My father-in-law, though still struggling to speak, would try to say, "Son, sit down and eat." For the first time, I no longer felt like an outsider at that table. Where I was wrong, I used to think I was being looked down on. But the truth was, I had also built my own wall. I was defensive. I kept my distance. I was polite, but I never truly opened my heart. I agreed to live with my wife's family out of love, but deep inside, I always carried a bit of wounded pride. I lived as if I were only temporarily staying, and people could feel that. Only when the crisis came, when I stopped thinking about labels, about who was right or wrong, did I truly step into this family with all my heart. And when I opened up sincerely, they opened up too. Were those 10 years worth it? Someone once asked me, "If you could choose again, would you still move in with your wife's family?" I used to think the answer would be no, but now, I stay silent for a long time before answering. If I hadn't, maybe my ego would have remained intact. But I would never have learned what responsibility beyond pride truly means. I would never have seen a strong man spend his whole life learning how to say "I'm sorry." I would never have heard the words I will remember forever. "You are my son." Those 10 years were not easy. There were tears, insecurities, nights I wanted to leave. But without those 10 years, I would not be the man I am today. The value of a money used to think value lay in what you own, whose name is on the house, how much you earn, how others see you. Now I understand. Value lies in where you stand when hardship strikes. Do you walk away, or do you stay? Living with my wife's family did not make me smaller. The way I saw it did. And when I lifted my head and stepped beyond it, it was no longer a burden. If you are in the same situation, maybe you are being called a name that hurts you. Maybe you are living with the feeling of being less than. I'm not saying this road is easy, but I believe this. Don't let pride destroy your opportunity to grow. Some recognition does not come immediately. Some apologies take a life-changing moment to be spoken. Some people only understand your worth when they fall and see who stays beside them. And some men only discover how strong they truly are when they overcome prejudice. What about you? A man living with his wife's family. Is that weakness? Or is it strength to put love and responsibility above ego? If you were in my position, would you leave to protect your pride, or stay to protect your commitment? Write down your honest thoughts. A man who lives with his wife's family for 10 years shouldn't even talk about manliness. Real manliness means being independent, providing a home for your wife and kids, not living in someone else's house and then telling a touching story about it. Living off them? In what way? He worked, he contributed, he stepped up when crisis hit. Living under the same roof doesn't mean being a freeloader. Don't equate a living arrangement with a person's worth. If he wasn't dependent, why was his salary monitored and every little thing scrutinized? That already sounds like being in a weak position. A man living like that has no voice. Whether someone is weak or not depends on how they handle themselves. He didn't argue, didn't run away, he chose actions to change perceptions. That's emotional control, something many men can't do. Changed by enduring for 10 years? That sounds more like self-consolation than strength. If he were truly strong, he would have moved out long ago. Move out just to protect his ego? And when his father-in-law had a stroke, then what? Who would take responsibility? Who would take care of him? Or would you say, that's not my duty? Caring is a matter of decency, I don't deny that. But don't turn sacrifice into proof of manliness. That's simply an obligation once you're married. Many people have obligations, but how many would sacrifice a rising career to care for someone who once looked down on them? It's easy to talk, doing it is hard. The real issue is that the wife's family never respected him from the start. A relationship that requires you must live with us isn't equal to begin with. Setting a condition doesn't automatically mean oppression. Every family has its own circumstances. An only daughter, elderly parents, an existing house, staying to take care of them isn't wrong. What's wrong is being labeled the live-in son-in-law for 10 years. If there was real respect, that stigma wouldn't have been allowed to persist. That stigma comes from society, not just the family. And he was the one who broke it by living with integrity. If everyone fears public judgment, nothing will ever change. Broke what? Society still sees live-in sons-in-law as inferior. One nice story doesn't change reality. Reality changes because of stories like this. If we keep clinging to the idea that a man must own a house to have value, we'll never escape material pressure. Material pressure is what motivates men to strive. Living with the wife's family long-term can make someone lose ambition and settle. On the contrary, some men work twice as hard in that situation to prove themselves. The issue isn't the circumstance, it's inner strength. I still think it's risky. When conflicts happen, the live-in son-in-law is always in a weaker position. Whose name is on the house? Who holds decision-making power? Reality can be brutal. You're only weak if you place yourself lower. After the crisis, he earned recognition. The dynamic changed. Not every family is as controlling as you assume. Recognition after 10 years of enduring, was it worth it? If the stroke had never happened, would anything have changed? Maybe not, but life isn't always fair immediately. What matters is that when the moment came, he chose to stay and do the right thing. And that proves something. Living with your wife's family doesn't make a man smaller, prejudice does.